I was just fascinated by the work that you do in being a futurist.
And what is happening is that the institutions and the ideas and everything that we've all been familiar with and that showed up all of our lives are all collapsing. They're imploding on each other, making a kind of the vacuum for the emergence of a new world. Within 39 days of the Rogan and Trump interview, there will be major kind of issues in the sky.
Or since you started mentioning this whole notion of kind of like the nature of reality and cosmology, you're familiar probably with this gateway process, which was this CIA classified document. Just interesting that it kind of calls it all out as kind of a matrix. So if you've never seen this document, this is stamped with the Department of the Army. Americans failed to pay $700 billion in taxes in their 21 returns. So that would be the 22 tax year. And the percentage of U.S. household that paid no federal income tax in 2021 is 57%. It's a huge number.
It's the tea leaves. Read
and
the
how
tea
do you
leaves.
maintain democracy when that happens? Because
Yeah, well, you don't.
that's such a massive. Yeah, you can't. John Petersen, such a pleasure to have you here with me. It was really nice to meet you recently at the Walter Russell Museum in Waynesboro, Virginia. And that wasn't our first meeting. I met you, I guess, 2 years ago at the same setting, in the same setting. And I was just fascinated by the work that you do in being a futurist. And you've been a futurist for quite some time. You've been the CEO and lead at the Arlington Institute, which is based in and around, I guess, the Washington, D.C. area. And you've worked with Department of Defense and worked with probably many government agencies. And I thought, who better to have on this think tank than to have someone who actually is from a true think tank as a futurist. So welcome to Think Tank, John.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Nice to be with you, for sure.
So then you ended up going straight into working for government agencies and sort of like, I guess, predicting and doing scenario planning for all kinds of different possible scenarios. And I guess the focus would be predominantly geopolitical, social.
Well, yes and no. I came out of a pretty conservative religious background, and the principles of that conservative Protestantism kind of hung around, and I always felt that I had to, that I needed to be doing something that was trying to benefit humanity and country and so on at the same time. And so we originally got involved with working with the leadership of the military to help them rethink the idea of national security. When I first got in there, and certainly all of my experience in the Navy was all about, as I like to say, killing people and breaking things. And they and it was really obvious to me early on that there were things inbound, social value shifts and environmental things and revolution in technology and a variety of things. They're just no fooling national security issues. And that was not kind of a natural part of the process in which the government, the military, kind of analyzed their futures and their potential roles that they were going to have to play. And so I carved out that space and kind of in time became kind of the de facto futurist for the Department of Defense, and worked with the Army, with the Navy and the Marine Corps and the Air Force and the Coast Guard primarily.
Interesting. So I guess you continue to do that for quite some time, right? Doing that type of work for the Department of Defense. And can you give me an idea of things that are not classified per se, but things that you kind of...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I've never worked on any classified programs. I've had security clearances for sure, but they never done anything classified, and I certainly never did anything for any of the intelligence agencies or community.
Got it.
But we did a lot of the most effective way to systematically think about the future is the scenario planning. I used to be associated with an organization called the Global Business Network, which was the best, most accomplished kind of scenario planning outfit on the planet at the time. And so the basic notion is that since you cannot predict the future, there's Nobel Prize winning science that makes that case. That what you really need to do is, if you can systematically look at the alternatives, and particularly in the terms of the interest to your client, whoever you're doing this for. I could build scenarios about what my mother's going to have for breakfast next week, and it doesn't make any difference, and
Yep.
so on. And so what you've
Mm-hmm.
got to really do is get it focused very rapidly and clearly on the things that are critical and important for whoever you're working for, or whatever you're thinking
Mm-hmm.
about. And that was a discipline that the military had never used before, and so we brought that into the Department of Defense in a significant kind of way, and help to help them kind of see in quite realistic terms that this was not all about, steel on targets and the usual kind of things that they all looked at. I mean, I had a
Mm-hmm.
project where I took the 21 most senior generals of the Marine Corps through 8 two-day workshops to build a new vision for the Marine Corps. And there was very little of it was about warfighting. It was all about this expanded kind of view of how the reality works and what was coming downstream, and how they had to be prepared for things that they otherwise hadn't thought about.
Hi, I'm Robert Edward Grant. I invite you to explore my transformative books, Philomath and Polymath, each designed to expand your understanding of the world and ourselves. In Philomath, which means lover of learning, discover how mathematics weaves together physics, music, and prime number theory, revealing the universe's interconnected nature. It's more than a book, it's an enlightening voyage. Polymath builds on Philomath's insights, exploring the genius of thinkers like Pythagoras and Da Vinci, who used geometry to revolutionize science, art, and governance. Rediscover the polymathic roots that sparked past ages of enlightenment. Join me on this journey as well. Visit robertedwardgrant.com to get your copies today. Let's foster a new era of enlightenment and collaboration for a brighter future. Interesting. So you're basically looking at, I'm guessing, hotspots around the world and trying to predict where there might be social unrest or changes coming.
Well, you'd think so, but there are plenty of people who are trying to do that kind of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
the government in general and the intelligence services in particular have got that really tied up. And they've got a lot of very sophisticated things that they're using, including game theory and very advanced supercomputers and other kinds of stuff to try to do that. And so that's really not the area in which I play. The thing that's unique about what I do, and it comes, I don't know where it came from, but in any case, I'm interested in the kind of the full spectrum about how reality works. And by that, I mean, I talk about kind of conventional things, so I can talk technology and economics and other things with you, like, as good as most people. But as you certainly understand, there's more to life than what you can see, and there is a whole lot going on in other kind of dimensions outside of the sensory set that we all have that I have certainly experienced many times in different kind of ways. I used to be on the board of the Monroe Institute, if you've ever heard of them, down in
Yep.
and they use hemisync and do other levels of consciousness and so on. And
Mm-hmm.
I haven't gone out. I've been out of my body a couple of times. But anyway, once you have those kinds of experiences, if you're awake and thinking it all, what you could come to the conclusion quickly is that this doesn't work the way they told me in engineering school, right? And so
Yeah.
that's and And so that all led in time to uh, understanding that we're at an extraordinary time in history, unprecedented, as a matter of fact, where we're going from one era, one age to another one. And what is happening is that the institutions and the ideas and everything that we've all been familiar with and that showed up all of our lives are all collapsing. They're imploding on each other, making a kind of the vacuum for the emergence of a new world and a new human. And that that's just like
Mm.
big stuff. And that is how can you find a better kind of environment to play to be a futurist than to be driven into the middle of the biggest change that in recorded history, at least. And so that's what kind of animates me and keeps me going, because I'm convinced that we are literally on the verge of the emergence of a new human. You talk about 24 strands of DNA, and I've talk about 12 strands that are from other kind of sources. And in any case, there are this huge kind of expansion in awareness and capabilities that we're on the verge of, enabled, I believe, by energy coming out of the center of the galaxy, and uh, cosmic stuff coming out of the sun, driven because of the whole electric kind of nature of the universe. And
Mhm.
these things are they're popping up all over the world. I mean, there are people that have the ability to read your mind and manifest stuff, and read auras and do all kinds of things all over the place. And those are kind of the emergent indicators, the early kind of indicators of this major change that comes together when you have a complex adaptive system and you get a rapid state change on it. Then what happens is you get little pieces and places where you start the emergent change, and then you get accretion, and people and other ones come around, and it gets more substantive, and then goes boom like that, and very quickly. That's the dynamics of going from water to ice. And but it happens in many kind of similar situations. And so we're in the middle of that, and I think that it's at best it's another 10 years, and it's a whole different world, and it's a whole different kind of place, and driven in part by uh, engagement with other worldly life and all kinds of things that all are just going to change the essence of who we are and who we think we are and how we understand reality.
So, okay, let's unpack this for a moment. So, then what do you think? And I mean, how much of what you're talking about in this context does the government already, you know, are they already aware of? How much is changing?
It's hard to tell for sure. The government's a really big place, and in general, they're not aware. But there is buried within the system, there's little pockets of uh, enlightenment that are kind of necessarily suppressed, but they're around. And some of the and then you don't know what you don't know, because there's a whole lot of stuff that's been classified and stuck under the table, and it's been there for a long time. I mean, the whole business about UFOs and alien life, the government's been doing that in DoD for decades, that nobody knew about. And the whole alien UFO thing is one example. And what it's now since 2017, the last 5 years or 6 years, it's now becoming clear that there have been programs for decades that have been highly classified, where uh, they have recovered craft and bodies and done reverse engineering and all kinds of things, and all that has worked its way up to the Senate and the House, and there are now dedicated uh, kind of subcommittees or groups that are working on that seriously working on that. And
Hmm.
when I was in when I was in the Navy and when I was running around the Pentagon, I couldn't find anybody that talked about any of that kind of stuff, but it was all underneath. I mean, they've got a whole system for denying the existence of what they're doing. And so all I can say is that there are, you have to kind of, it's like, I guess, like any other big organization, you got to go find the kind of the smart people and the ones that are open minded. And, but it's certainly not the major kind of knowledge in the system.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the whole UFO phenomenon right now, and you have to wonder about all these things that I used to think were just, to be honest, like conspiracy theory type stuff. And then after about, I think it was about 2021, I started realizing, geez, there's an awfully high number of these conspiracy theories that I thought ridiculous that are turning out to be kind of true. Like,
Yeah,
what the heck is going on? And that's been kind of a big reveal, I think, for so many people. And whether it's recently the weather modification stuff that's been happening, um,
sure.
it makes you wonder as well. I mean, I personally got I had a package delivered to me at my office about a year and a half ago. That, well, it was 2 years ago now. That was analysis that was performed by an astrophysicist, and I won't say his name, but I was copied on this, and it was sent to the White House. It was sent to Elon Musk and to a bunch of other people that you would think would be, very, very well informed type people, and not just government agency. It was sent to the NSA. It was sent to NASA. It was sent to lots of different people because I saw who all was copied on this, and it came by Federal Express. And it was like about a 53-page document that was putting forth the notion mathematically that the asteroid Apophis was, the way that they calculated that it was going to narrowly miss Earth. It's going to dip below the satellites, the low level satellites, and come within approximately 18,000 miles of Earth. Now, to put that in context, Earth
Yeah,
is going around the sun at a speed of 67,000 miles an hour. So 18,000 miles from Earth is about, call it, it's less than a third of an hour, right? It's basically it's like less than 20 minutes. And to be going at that speed as well, and it's the size of the Rose Bowl. And this guy's assertion was that the mathematics that was relied upon that revealed that the chances that it would hit Earth were less than 1 in 37 ratio were incorrect because they used the wrong value for the Euler number.
hmm,
And so he sent it to me to analyze as well, as someone who understands mathematics, and again, all these other folks were on this. And I have to say that the analysis was not bad, and it was a little bit alarming because I felt like I was in that movie Don't Look Up.
yeah,
And I thought, well, surely someone's going to do something about this, right? So I and then also you kind of wonder, is this just some sort of like, person who's kind of like off the rocker a bit and kind of done this? I'm sure that does happen pretty often also, but the ramifications of it are pretty substantive. So I did get a bit concerned about it. I'm not going to lie. You start to wonder how much of what's going on is known by government, or how much of it is really that they're ignorant, and then you've got pockets maybe that know a little bit about it, and it's not really as well oiled of a machine as we all might like to think, where there's good communication lines happening
yeah,
at the governmental level for things that are like, either natural disaster risks, or where there might actually be, some tampering going on, like what is now being asserted, and the allegations related to weather tampering that have
yeah.
happened, around Asheville in North Carolina.
Well, it's a little of all of that. That there certainly is incompetence in the bureaucratic system, that's for sure. But there are what's likely happens in the case of what you've just described is they classified it and put it in, and NOAA and NASA or any number of other kind of people are looking at it and playing with it, but they don't let anybody know. and they're very concerned about Americans getting afraid and uh, generating social instability and all of that. And so there's a great deal of things. I mean, I heard something the other day by somebody who was in a position to know. He says there's more classified information in the world now than unclassified information. And so, that's a lot of stuff that they've got under the table in black programs and other kind of things that you're just never going to know. I mean, in the Department of Defense, there are only 3 people, and there used to be when I was running around there are only 3 people who knew everything, all of the programs that DoD was funding. Only 3 people, because all of the services and different agencies and NSA and all these guys who are all under DoD are all doing their own secret squirrel stuff, and you're never going to find that out unless they decide they want to tell you, or unless a guy like
Well, I
Snowden
mean,
comes out.
uh-huh. Absolutely. And what about, I mean, now that, or since you started mentioning this whole notion of kind of like the nature of reality and cosmology, you're familiar probably with this gateway process, which was this CIA classified document on the nature of reality and consciousness.
That was Monroe Institute. That's the gateway program at
Uh-huh.
Monroe. That's the first one you got to go through if you go down there. And so they sent some major, if I remember right, down through the program and he wrote a report on the thing, and why they classified it, I have no idea. It's a pretty good kind of review of how the whole system works and so on. And as I remember, there was one missing page in it that they didn't publish, but people found it, and there wasn't really anything substantial or spooky or anything in there.
Yeah, no, it's just interesting that it kind of calls it all out as kind of a matrix. And, it seems like it would have ramifications to, if this is true,
Well,
and this was back in 1983
yeah, and that
at
was
Fort Meade.
the guy they sent down there. It came out, as I remember, it came out of INSCOM, which is the Army's intelligence operation, and they were interested in it because John Alexander, who was a colonel over there, had been involved in the remote viewing program that got started at the CIA, and so there's, like I say, there was this pocket of people over in the Army and a few in CIA and others that were sensitive to and interested in these kinds of things, but it was certainly not a general kind of understanding and interest.
It's pretty interesting. So if you've never seen this document, this is stamped with the Department of the Army. And let's see, hopefully I might be able to actually pull
Yeah,
it up.
it's a very interesting, it's a good summary. And when they were looking for the missing piece, they had went to Monroe Institute and said, "Have you seen this or know anything about it?" And they said, "Yeah, sure, we've got the report here. We'll send you a copy of it."
Yeah,
I used to sit,
actually, I
I used
unfortunately
to sit on the
pulled it up.
board of Monroe.
Yeah, so the subject is analysis and assessment of the gateway process. And it's to the commander of U.S. Army Operational Group. You tasked me to provide an assessment of the gateway experience in terms of its mechanics and ultimate practicality. As I set out to fulfill that tasking, it soon became clear that in order to assess the validity and the practicality of the process, I needed to do enough supporting research and analysis to fully understand how and why this process works. Frankly, sir, that proved to be an extremely involved and difficult business. Initially, based on conversations with a physician who took the gateway training with me, I had recourse to the biomedical models developed by Itzhak Bentov to obtain information concerning the physical aspects of the process. Then I found it necessary to delve into various sources for information concerning quantum mechanics in order to be able to describe the nature and functioning of human consciousness. I had to be able to construct a scientifically valid and reasonably lucid model of how consciousness functions under the influence of the brain hemisphere synchronization technique employed by Gateway. Once this was done, the next step involved recourse to theoretical physics in order to explain the character of the time-space dimension and the means by which expanded human consciousness transcends it in achieving Gateway's objectives. Finally, I again found it necessary to use physics to bring the whole phenomenon of out-of-body states into the language of physical science, to remove the stigma of its occult connotation, and put it in the frame of reference suited to objective assessment. I mean, first of all, for somebody who's a layperson reading this as a Department of the Army letter, it's kind of mind-boggling that this is even a topic of discussion. I mean, it's kind of like looking at the Stargate project, which was this remote viewing men who stare at
Right.
goats thing, and really using it. And there were some pretty amazing things that were done with that, right? Like the
Yeah.
bombing, I
No,
think
it
it was in
was.
1990.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the bombing of the ship that was in off of the coast of Sudan, right? And I think it was 1997. They predicted it something 20 years in advance, exactly as it was as it would happen. They were able to remote view to the rings of Jupiter
Right.
and see
Yeah.
exactly the nature and describe it perfectly.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
know
this
this.
was really mind blowing stuff,
Yeah. I
and I'm
know
not
those guys.
surprised.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
them.
They were my friends. The ones who started that were my friends. And this remote viewing Jupiter was Ingo Swann, who was one of the first kind of psychics that they got involved in, who named remote viewing the term. And he was a great friend. I used to go have lunch with him every month up in New York. So yeah, the stuff is very real. And once you get exposed to that, like I say, then there's no backing away. It's very clear that reality doesn't work the way, like I say, they taught me in engineering school. And if you're curious at all, then it's pretty slippery slope down into all of these very interesting kind of places. And so I've tried a whole lot of different things.
It's interesting. This letter goes on to say Niels Bohr, the renowned physicist, once responded to his son's complaints about the obtuse nature of certain concepts in physics by saying, "You are not thinking, you are merely being logical. The physics of altered human consciousness deals with some conceptualizations that are not easily grasped or visualized exclusively in the context of ordinary left brain linear thinking. So, to borrow Dr. Bohr's mode of expression, parts of this paper require not only logic, but a touch of right brain intuitive insight to achieve a complete, comfortable grasp of the concepts involved. Nevertheless, once that is done, I'm confident that their construction and application will stand up to the test of rational critique." It's interesting. Yesterday, I did a podcast here with Matthias Di Stefano, who's a close friend of mine. He has a television series on Gaia, and he was wearing a T-shirt that was all about left and right brain hemisynchronization. And fascinating that this is coming up again because it was one of those T-shirts that shows the right brain exploding out with color and everything, and then the left brain exploding out with math and numbers, and you kind of see the anatomy of the brain. Paradoxically, having gone to such great lengths to avoid trying to render judgments based on a cult or dogmatic frame of reference, in the end, I found it necessary to return, at least briefly, to the question of the impact of the gateway experience on common belief systems. I did so because although it was essential to avoid attempting to render an assessment in the context of such systems, I felt that it was necessary, after having completed the analysis, to point out that the resulting conclusions do not do any violence to the fundamental mainstream of either Eastern or Western belief systems. Unless that point is clearly established, the danger exists that some people will reject the whole concept of the gateway experience in the mistaken belief that it contradicts and is therefore alien to all that they hold to be right and true. It's interesting because this lieutenant colonel, right, Wayne McDonnell, was clearly convinced by the gateway process,
Yeah. Well,
which to me is fascinating in and of itself.
yeah, but it's interesting. The remote viewers here you talk about, the remote viewers had to mask who they were for their intelligence product to be accepted by the system. That is to say that what they found out early on, if it was clear where the intelligence that they produced was coming from, it would be discounted across for just the kind of reasons that you're just talking about. And so they had to make up some kind of term, C5A or something like that. And so nobody knew where it was coming from, because that's the only way they'd be objective about this stuff, because otherwise there were deep religious and other kind of feelings and beliefs that rose to the surface, and literally they'd say, oh, this is all demonic and other kind of things. And so there's, you, like I say, the system has educated and shaped us all so very much into their box, that there aren't a whole lot of folks who are willing to uh, be open-minded and say, it may not be what I know or what I've heard or what they told me.
Yeah, no, I mean it's so fascinating because this does seem like it would run afoul of so many of the traditional ways of thinking, because this is moving out of materialism and right into mentalism.
Yeah,
And
right.
mainstream science is far from being in the field of mentalism yet. I mean, everyone's starting now to talk about consciousness and the impact of the observer and the observer effect, but it's still not really mentalism. It's trying to describe how mental and consciousness models can interact with the material world, rather than the mental model being the actual foundational basis of the material world.
Yeah, except for the CIA, which back in the 70s, when Bill Colby was the director of CIA, and Frank Church was a senator from Idaho, I think it was, who had the church hearings
Mhm.
and opened up the family jewels of the CIA in those hearings, and that's where the MK Ultra saw the light of day. And let me tell you, the people in MK Ultra, they were doing all kinds of work trying to figure out how reality worked and how consciousness worked and how you could manipulate it and engineer it and influence it. And it's another example of there's being a little segment of people within the system who have an interest in these things. And in that particular case, that the MK Ultra thing, that's really not. Yeah, that's not a very nice. They were doing really sad things for a lot of people, and they literally got to the place where they could get people. They could split their minds and have one aspect of their minds be controllable, and so then they say a certain word, they could get the person to switch to that mental segment, and in that kind of mode they could say another key word and they could go and shoot somebody, and then they say another word and they switch back to the other place in their mind, and they would never know that they had shot somebody or even remember the situation. And so there's been a whole lot of work. They've spent many, many millions of dollars with psychologists and sociologists and other kinds of things at the CIA, trying to figure out how you can get people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do.
Wow. Okay, so as you look at this, then how would you explain, what's your view of what cosmology is? How would you describe the nature of reality?
Well, the best models I have go back to, again, the Gnostic Gospels and the Nag Hammadi scriptures and some of those basic kind of notions. And again, I really like the Hermes Trismegistus and the Hermetic kind of
Mhm.
principles that say
Mhm.
all is mind, and that everything vibrates, and then it has cyclical kind of
Periodicity. Mhm.
periodicity, and there are, and those kinds of things. Um, I guess I've come to the conclusion that if all is mind and God is everything and everything, then I'm an integral part of God, right? And how can it not
Yeah.
be? How can it not be?
Mhm.
If God is everything, then I'm part of God, right? And there are all kinds of interesting people who haven't been able to internalize that idea and be able to do manifestation and generate all kinds of. Neville Goddard, for instance, who was an extraordinary guy, could kind of manifest anything. And he figured out in his opera, the entering argument was, I'm God. I can do whatever I want to do. And that, by the way, seems to be the kind of the entry point for the emergence of this new human. There's a mind shift. There's a mind change that has to happen, that where you see yourself and you see the world in a whole different kind of way. And what that does is then opens you up to access these capabilities that we all have, but have been suppressed, again, I would say, by the system, by the religion and education and social and government and all these kinds of things. Have all worked to compress essentially the essence of who we are, and to build these kind of onion-like layers of insulation such that we cannot do and be who we want to be, the sovereignty that we want to be, that we have the ability to do, is all, we've got all these rules and laws and stuff and reasons that have fear, and that somebody's going to laugh at you, and on and on. And that's the essence of this transition, it seems to me, is this breaking free from that and realizing this essential sovereignty, this ability to kind of do and be whoever you want to be. It doesn't mean you got to be stupid in it. And I did a video once and said, in the middle of COVID, and said, I don't work for the governor of this state. I don't have to do what the governor says. And I get all this mail coming back saying, yeah, the governor, he's the governor. No, no, no. I can do what he says if I want to, but in the end, I get to decide, And so there's a place, if you follow me, there's a place in there where you start to see yourself, and you see the world, and you see how this all works in a different way, and it suddenly enables you to blossom into this larger space, which is the essence of the beginning of this new human, as far as I'm concerned.
So, okay, so let's talk more about that. And,
Okay.
and before we get to the new human and this idea of greater sovereignty, one of the things that you said to me when we were in the Walter Russell Museum was that your work is sort of pointing to some massive changes from a geopolitical, social perspective between 2025 and 2027, and that it was going to have a kind of a huge impact on everything, like human
Right.
consciousness, but in addition, like how we organize ourselves and everything. Can you speak about that a little bit?
The thing that's different about what I do compared to I guess, any other futurist that I know, is that first of all, I work, like I said, in this both conventional and unconventional space. But more than that, um, uh, I guess I think of it as, if you want to see inside of a black, dark room that's got no windows or doors, and you've got no way of knowing in there what it's going to be, and it's really important to you, then you need necessarily to go to some kind of exotic or unconventional kind of way to start to give you an inkling of what might be inside. And so that's what uh, and I got to that point of view from having been exposed to the remote viewers and the Monroe Institute and other levels of consciousness, and a little bit of hallucinogenic substances that showed me that there was a whole different thing out there. And so once you start with that, then what you really need to do is have this kind of openness that will allow you to explore. It's really a kind of an explorer kind of a situation. And so uh, what uh, what's important here, I think, and that's the essence of this kind of evolutionary push, is to begin to be very open about these alternative ways in which to understand reality, and it's started for me with finding out some things about extraterrestrial life and being briefed in some ways in some programs, and you suddenly find out that you're just it doesn't work the way you thought it works. And so uh, you asked me earlier about my kind of perspective on cosmology. I think that we're headed. There are kind of two tracks that are presented to all of us, and one of them is a
Mm-hmm.
track that is largely kind of described by technocracy. That is this kind of matrix-like environment where the technology controls everything, and humans are suppressed and used primarily for energy and other, minor kind of things. And if you listen to Kurzweil and any number of other kind of guys who play in this space, they will paint you the picture that says that by 2040 or something like that, the Ray talks about the single computer having a billion times the computing power of all the human beings on the planet, and from then on, you work for them, and they run it. And they talk about 2032 or 2030 being a time when your minds are fully plugged into the cloud and your brain, and so that you are kind of in seamless kind of integration with that whole thing. Well, that's one track, and that track is a track that's largely, if you want the bumper stickers, that's the control. That is that all these systems are organized specifically to kind of control you and suppress you in some way. The other track, the bumper sticker, is about freedom, and it's about personal development and emergence and of capabilities that are intrinsic to us, but that have been suppressed. And I I believe that what we have innately, but we haven't been able to access it very well, is the ability to do everything that the technology guys are trying to sell over on the other side. Is that if you develop your intuition effectively, that you ought to be able to, get at the answer to about anything that you want. You don't need the cloud and uh, AI and Chat GPT and such. I mean, we're not there yet, but that's the direction it goes. And so that's the direction about sovereignty and about rising to the next level of human development. It's a evolutionary jump or leap. And what that presents you with is the possibility, literally, and then the certainty that you can build a new world around a whole nother set of new principles, because kind of by definition, you don't go through that kind of process without seeing things in a different way and having a whole new framework for understanding not only who you are, but how the larger reality works. And that then translates directly into different ideas about government and economics and so on and so on. So suddenly, you're into a really new world. And so what I'm interested in doing, and what we're focused on here at the Arlington Institute, is the whole business of trying to build a model and now facilitate this transition to a new world, and literally ultimately build a model that millions of people can all contribute to, and to help do a kind of a ground up kind of development of what a new world might look like. If you don't have a model, or if you don't have a vision, you don't know where you're going. I mean, you know that. And uh, and so if you're at this extraordinary junction in history where you've got this choice, and you got the ability, literally, you can see it on the horizon, of a new world that operates in a different way, that is equitable and has all these kind of principles that we all aspire to, then you either got to wait around and hope that maybe somehow the whole system kind of comes together around those ideas, or you drive it that way. I mean, and that's called a normative scenario in the futures business, and so that's what we're trying. That's what we're trying to do.
Hmm. So, what do you think that means then for, does that mean that with all this new sovereignty and this new realization for humanity, and maybe even the formation of kind of this new human consciousness, I mean, what's that going to mean for all the structures that are in society right now
Oh yeah. Well,
that are kind of
they're all
still?
imploding. They're all imploding. They're unsustainable. They're structurally unsustainable at the very very fundamental level of the kind of the animating this the principles and things that all of the major structures. I mean, we got the problems that we got on this planet because of the structures and the way and the institutions and the value systems that we have. And so they're all going to come apart. And so you had asked me earlier about how, where they what was the kind of the near term or implications
Mhm.
and how that might what that might be. Well, the when I say it's all going to come apart, I literally mean that. I mean that in financial terms, the Western and all of the countries in the Western world are all overextended. They've been built making money for free, and they've got huge debt overhang. I mean, the U.S. now is $33 trillion or something like that. A third of the revenue generated by the IRS goes just to pay the interest on the debt, and there is a date certain at somewhere between 2027 and 2028 when the whole system collapses because it's impossible for them to pay the bills. There's just no way out of it. I mean, you've got very
Why can't
sophisticated
they just why can't they just print more money?
well, because they've got to issue debt. They have to issue debt, and they can't. Uh, and right now, they're very close to having nobody want to buy their debt. And when nobody will buy their debt, then uh, uh, the whole system fails. And that's what's driving this debt. It's a uh, kind of a global debt crisis. That's what's driving this whole issue of trying to reset the whole financial system that the World Economic Forum and others are proposing. What they've said is there's no way out of this. And so we have to collapse the system. And if we collapse the system, then we can wipe away our debt and we'll throw a bone to the people and tell them that they don't have to pay their credit cards and their mortgage and their car payments and stuff like that. And that, but what they're really trying to do is get rid of the trillions and trillions of dollars that they're not going to be able to pay. There's a guy who I mentioned to you, Martin Armstrong, down in
Yep.
Florida, who's an economist
Mhm.
who has figured this all out in spades. And Marty, early on when he was a kid up in New York, he was working when he was in high school in a coin shop, and he was fascinated by the history of all of these coins and things. And when he was going to go to college, his father said, "You got to get a real job. Go learn computer programming." And so he learned computer programming, but he was always interested in coins and trading and wanted to work on Wall Street. Well, he got to Wall Street, but he still needed computer trading. And what he found out, and you'll find this interesting. I mean, we talked a little bit about it the other day, is that he found out that there are these cyclical aspects of history. And he could see it in the
Mhm.
coinage and when it showed up and when it didn't and when it quit and so on. And he correlated that with history. And he suddenly found out that there were these regular, predictable kind of cycles in the way things work. Well, he built that. He expanded that into a piece of technology that he calls Socrates. And Socrates is the first, at least in the open world, the first real AI that monitors 73, I think it is, different uh, aspects of our reality, and he has isolated the cyclical characteristics of all of this. So whether it's weather or climate or politics or finance or futures markets or whatever it turns out to be, and the thing that's compelling about this, it's never been wrong in 40 years. He can tell
Wow.
you, unlike anybody else, when the market's going to hit the exact top and the bottom. And, at one time he had the largest financial advisory firm in the world because of that. And, uh, it's kind of been an interesting story. The CIA came to him one day and said, "We want the source code for your program because it's so accurate." And he said, "Nah, I'm not going to give you the source code." And they said, "No, we're really serious." And he said, "No, I'll take you on as a client, like any of my other clients, but I'm not giving you the source code." And so they essentially said, "Well, watch this," and they ginned up uh, some charges against them, which are minor little things, and literally, and they threw him in prison for 6 years and put him in solitary confinement. And he had to have one of his friends from Congress finally lean on him to get him out of solitary confinement, but he was in prison for 6 years. He gets out and they come back to him again and said, "Now are you going to give it to us?" And he said, "No." And they did it again for 5 years. He was 11 years. He was in prison because of the effectiveness of his program. So the bottom line of the story, what his software says is that, and for 40 years it said that this year where starts World War III. Next year, between 2025 and 2027, is a global civil war. And what that means, I believe, is that there's an uprising across the planet by citizens against their governments. I mean, when you think of a civil war, you think of two factions within a country that are fighting for power or something like this. This is different. This is global, and it's an uprising. And if you then say, well, is there any indications that say that might be the case? Well, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of people on the streets all over the world that are all, in one way or another, demonstrating against their governments. And so he says that after 2027, then what happens is there's a breakup of the major kind of political kind of relationships. There's no
Hmm.
EU after that,
Hmm.
and there's no United States of America. That uh, the U.S. comes apart, and over the period from 2027 to 2032 is there's a reconfiguration in North America, and you end up with 5 or 6 different new countries, and and by 2032, and by the way, that's just kind of straight line projection. From his kind of point of view, the Chinese kind of own the place. Well, as I said to you when we chatted about this, he has nothing in his database or in his history about extraterrestrial life showing up. I don't think he's got anything about climate change and what the implications might be. He certainly doesn't have anything about AI and what the role of AI would be. So there's some real wild cards in the mix here
So
that could.
there's no natural disaster overlay in this.
Well, there easily could be a natural disaster, but I come back to saying that there's no Armageddon in this, in either his scenario or any of the ones that I kind of uh, take on, because if you believe that there is a purpose for humanity, if you believe that we're not unique in the universe, and that this kind of experience that we're going through has happened other places and that there's life on other planets, if you believe that there are life that's far more advanced than we are, that who have a role to play in kind of husbanding life on new planets and being and playing that kind of encouraging role, and then what? And the whole objective is to be successful in this thing. Then, if you had an Armageddon kind of end of the world, blow the whole place up thing, then it just compresses, it blows the whole evolutionary track out of the water, and it's not available for humans anymore. And I've got enough confidence in the system and the process, and that I believe that there's a critical mass of people coming together who see the world in a new way, and see themselves in a new way, and want to be a part of this thing and this new world and this new human, and that there's enough to make this shift and make this work, and that we're not going to blow the thing up. Which is not to say that they're not going to try, and there are going to be all kinds of problems and issues, but I don't think we blow the planet up.
Wow. So, okay. So basically, what you're saying is that between now and the end of 2027, there's going to be like global unrest.
Yeah,
You in
big
your
time,
prediction models,
really big time.
and namely, this will be like a lot of governments around the world in industrialized nations and probably in non-industrialized nations will get overthrown in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
this will be as part of the rise. And what's going to be the catalyst
Uh, uh,
that you believe actually that drives this?
all right. Well, it could be any of a number of things, and it's always a lot of fun to do a session, a scenario planning session, or an implications analysis kind of thing to kind of look across all this spectrum. I mentioned my book on wild cards, big surprises. That was an attempt to try to catalog about 85 different big events that could happen that could drive the place off in another direction. And so it's a really, there's quite a spectrum of places where it could go. But let me tell you about one other, to answer your question, to tell you about one other source that is interesting. There's a guy named Cliff High. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. His name is
Mhm.
CLIF, HIGH High. And he's a big brain guy up in uh, Washington State. Used to be living around Olympia, and it was involved with
Mhm.
Microsoft early on. And Microsoft used to hire him to run around and deal with the big network problems that nobody else could deal with. And so Cliff watched the behavior of these networks, and came to the conclusion that the whole kind of process could be predictive. And in particular, he came to the conclusion that humans were naturally psychic, and that it was suppressed, but that everybody had, to one degree or another, the innate psychic kind of capabilities, and that manifested itself in everyday people who otherwise had no knowledge or interest in this particular stuff. But it manifested itself in that when large perturbations were on the horizon that were inbound, what they essentially generated was a bow wave that came in front of it, and that washed in early on through society and through humanity, and it manifested itself in that language. They started to change their language, and they didn't know what they were doing, and it was not explicit about this event coming, but there was this. If you looked at how the language, new terms and phrases and things started to show up, what they would be is representative of this thing that was inbound. By the way, I have friends who say that you can look at modern art and do this and do the same thing. You can see in modern art where
Hmm.
this is going. You can see in music, where the. So anyway, it telegraphs ahead where this stuff is coming. And so what he did was build a giant web bot capability with billions of web bots. and that spiders that run across the web. And what they do is then they track how language changes in conversations that are ongoing in I think 6 different
Hmm.
languages now, and then he does longitudinal things. So he does it every month or every 2 weeks or whenever it is, and so then he can see the trends that happen, the new ideas that are showing up, and how they're moving from one area to another area, and
Hmm.
how they then translate over to other ones, uh, uh, and what that ends up being, and I'm giving him not at all the kind of attention and
Details.
time that he should have to
Hmm.
explain this, but what that ends up being is predictive. And
Hmm.
he's about 70% accurate. He had Trump 6 months beforehand. He had the Banda tsunami six
But
months before.
maybe he's just been watching The Simpsons.
What?
The Simpsons has a pretty good track record of predicting everything.
I know. No, it's bigger than that. So let me just tell you quickly. He's got a new. He has what he calls uh, t- uh, temporal markers, which are these kind of anomalous events that he sees that his data shows him is coming. And in 2009, he saw the first indications that there would be a major event where there were two major people that would be in a discussion that would be the indicator that there was the beginning of a whole new era on the planet. He didn't know at the time who they would be, but then by 2020, he went off to the best remote viewers in the country and in the world, and targeted them and asked them to look at what might happen during this period of time. And they came back and showed him pictures of Donald Trump and Joe Rogan doing an interview together and that was back in 2020. And so this guy Cliff High thought that might have something to do with the debates or something that put the election. It wasn't. And so when when Joe Rogan and Donald Trump agreed that they were going to have a debate, they were going to have an interview here within the next 3 weeks or something, the it suddenly raised and emphasized that one event as being a precursor to some downstream things that he sees coming. So, what are the downstream things that within uh, 39? His data says 39 days of the Rogan and Trump interview, there will be major kind of issues in the sky. And he says that it is uh, spaceships and jets and other kinds of big things. You asked about what's the catalyst that could kick this off.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and he says that there are major kind of events that are happening, and that is literally the the end of this last era and the beginning of the next one, and that the and so you say, what do you mean saucers and things flying around? Well, in the last 2 weeks, it's been reported that there are now 20-foot saucers that are flying around military bases in our country, and we have no idea who they are and what they're doing, and they're all over. They're commonly a bit seen in certain kind of places, and so there it, there have always been indications. There have been multiple indications that are all pointing to a time certain when humans and alien life was going to uh, space aliens, as he calls them, would start to come together, and we would see ourselves as part of a larger community. And I don't know, but it might be.
So you
He's
think that
been
will be the catalyst? the catalyst that
It very
we
well
have
could be
global conflict?
because,
Did you know that there's a new love affair with mathematics and geometry happening all around the world today? People who once despised these subjects in high school are now finding they're falling in love with them. Do you know why? Because math without meaning is simply information, whereas math with meaning is divine communication. My courses, The Etymology of Number and the Language of Light, guide you on a journey of self-discovery, sharpening your problem solving and pattern perceiving, as well as analytical and creative thinking, and unlocking your fullest polymathic potential. And most importantly, acquainting you with the mathematical language of the universe itself. You will never see the U inverse the same again. To get started, I recommend The Etymology of Number, a 4-part series that explores the evolution of numbers and their impact on fields like physics, chemistry, music, and art. It is the embodiment of Leonardo da Vinci's encouragement to study the science of art and the art of science. Learn how to see. Realize that everything connects to everything else. My second course series, The Language of Light, is a 6-part series that builds on concepts from the first course and offers deeper insights into unified sciences, ancient wisdom, spirituality, and their relevance to today. My courses are always fun and easy to understand. They intertwine mathematics, music, art, and consciousness, and illuminate the mathematical connections that span all disciplines of science and art. Register for these 2 courses, Etymology of Number and the Language of Light, at robertedwardgrant.com under the Courses tab. And join the Robert Edward Grant community chat on Orion Messenger for lively, engaging, and innovative discourse.
well, it could be. Robert, there are very few things that are as big and profound and deep as the kind of contact with extraterrestrial life. By definition, they've been around a whole lot longer than we have. They see the world and
Oh,
reality in
yeah.
a different way. They're a threat. I mean, I did a project around this to systematically think about what the implications might be. And
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about it, religion and politics and social and education and science, everything that starts to pull the pins on all of the structures that we have, because they all say, no, it doesn't work the way you think it does, and history wasn't the way you thought it was, and God doesn't exist in the terms that you think have been, and on and on and on and on, and it just is so fundamentally structure is it's just giant what the implications are, and so yeah, I think that something like that could be, I don't know, could be any of a number of things. Of course, we've got enough wars going around right now, and the possibility of something,
I would think it would have to be something that's going to somehow make the world understand that governments are toxic to the people.
well, I'll tell you what the strategy is on that. And this comes from multiple sources that are saying that there are kind of white hats within the system that are who've got an alternative scenario or a strategy to the black hats. And what they say, and again, there are multiple sources that all come, I don't know, they may be talking to each other. I don't know. But they come up with the same thing. And they say the only way that you get out of this thing is you drive society right up to the brink, and you walk them right up to the edge of the cliff, and then they just suddenly they get religion. They say, no, we're not going to do this, and that is the catalytic event. And nuclear war seems to be the event that they're trying to drive this thing up to in order to kind of facilitate the change and the
And
transition.
who are they? Who are they in this context?
Well, there are different groups call them by different names, but they say that there is a group within the defense and intelligence community that early on after Kennedy was killed, they realized that there was a force within inside of the government and the world, for that matter, that was trying to take over and eliminate kind of the Constitution and the constitutional way of living, I guess. And so it
Hmm.
started with apparently, so I'm told, a bunch of flag and general officers inside a DOD, and it was very quiet. And they started planning systematically about how to take the system back. And you could, uh, you could call them constitutionalists if you like. I don't know what they go by, but kind of that's a working idea. And as you certainly know, the government turns over all of the time, and so they had to bring new people in and so on. And but that
Hmm.
apparently uh, that group is active and playing a countering role to all of the dystopian kind of uh, pressure and efforts that are so obvious in everything that we see around us. And so I don't know who they are. They're not telling you who they are, but there are enough people uh, who are well known, that are influencers who have been
Hmm.
approached and explained. And listen, you don't know whether this is a disinformation thing or what's going on. I mean, in the end, you really like. I started off saying you don't know what you don't know, and yeah, that. But there seems to be a counter role going on in my mind. I believe that there are two kind of war rooms, and they're kind of a big room with all the screens all over and a bunch of people at consoles, and they've got huge computers, and they're working all of the alternative ways in which the system could operate. And if you try this, then what are the outcomes? I mean, it's 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 game theory kind of stuff, and that is certainly it's happening on the other side. And so they're all trying to handicap who's if we do this, what will they do, and what are the alternatives and everything. And this is very this is not just random. I mean, this is not just the we're not just seeing and living in this as just things that are just happening. These are all orchestrated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It definitely seems like something is afoot and that big change is coming. I think everybody feels that at some sort of very basic level. I feel there is also a natural um, component of this. Maybe it's Apophis, is what I'm basically feeling. And I'm also feeling that there's a coming pole shift,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that
that's one value.
what we're
Yeah,
seeing,
that's one
what we're
one thing.
seeing is that, yeah, what we're seeing is, with the aurora borealis this low, yes, it's true that aurora borealis comes as a result of increased solar flare activity, but the fact that it came so low in latitude on the planet is kind of very interesting in and of itself, because the solar flares should be pulled to the north and south poles, but the range, the magnetic poles of the north and south are definitely seem like they're kind of in flux, and they are moving quite a lot. So I don't remember, at least in my lifetime, seeing aurora borealis in California or in Florida or
Yeah,
in Mexico for that matter.
right. Well, clearly the magnetosphere is thinning, and the magnetic pole is at least shifting. And one of the problems or issues related to that is that as the magnetosphere starts to goes through this transition, that it thins, and so it presents less of a defensive and deflective shield to all of the cosmic energy coming out of the sun and other places in
Mhm.
the galaxy.
Mhm.
And so that is playing a role at one point. I mean, I would argue, I've got a lot of science that says that all of the climate change is all coming out of the sun. There's changes on the sun, and it's
Yeah.
not not humans that are driving this.
No, we're just going in. I think what we're doing is we're just going into a larger cycle, and
Yeah.
we're in spring now. And
Hmm.
so the planet is going to warm up, and it does. Every 24,000 years, we go through this cycle. And it's
Yeah.
going to get warmer and warmer until we get into, the next, I guess it would be 6,000, 6 to 9,000 years. It's going to get pretty warm.
Either that or it gets cold. And there are
Well,
some.
eventually it will get cold after that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well.
as we're going through the vernal equinox, we just passed through that in 2012,
Yeah.
and we're now in the northern side of the plane of
Yeah.
the ecliptic for the
Yeah.
Milky Way,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So the everything shifts for us when we're in that model of
Right.
time.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be an interesting thing as well, that as we get closer and closer to our sister star, which is a binary star system,
Yeah.
with us, it would be trinary with Sirius B, but Sirius A and Earth and the Sun are all sort of entangled together, and we're 8.6 light years away from Sirius A right now, and we're getting closer and closer. As we get closer and closer, then things start to speed up as well.
Sure.
So it creates like a slingshot.
And
And
I
I
think
think,
that produces the yuga cycles and all of the changes that
yes,
are attendant to that.
mhm, I think that's absolutely true. So, what would it be that would be a catalyst? I think the things that might be a catalyst would be some big revelations. I mean, obviously, UFO and contact is a big one, but some big revelations about how government has been systematically, damaging humanity.
Well,
I could see that.
I'll tell you how that happens. And that is that there are indications from some of these sources that say that starting in this month, that there are parts of the government that are not. Let me start here and say that last year in April, the IRS took in 35% less revenue than they did the year before. And so you say, what's going on,
Mm.
huh? What's happening? People aren't
So
paying
last year, the IRS took in 35% less
in
revenue.
April. In April. They had
Wow.
35%
So
less.
people just stopped paying taxes.
You got it. And now why are they not paying their taxes? Why did the IRS want 85 gun toting agents in their budget? Just out of the blue. Well, they're not getting their money, and so you say, why aren't people paying their taxes? Well, because the wisdom of crowds, they sussing the vibes on this one, and they're saying, this is a losing deal, and we're not gonna pay. Okay, so if in fact you have, now couple that up with this reset and the inability to sell bonds and other kind of things, and you work yourself very quickly into a place where the government does not have the revenue to be able to pay the people in the agencies in the government. Okay, well, what happened when the Soviet Union came apart and they had that kind of problem? Well, what you had is a whole bunch of people who had all kinds of atomic nuclear secrets and other such things, and they're trying to find a way in which to generate some money in order to buy groceries for their families. And they're up against the wall and they say, what do I own? What do I know? What do I own that has got some value that I can sell? And suddenly you've got secrets revealed all over the place because people start coming out and saying, what did you get me to know about this or that? And there are many suggestions, indications that say that that's inbound. Well, if that happens, then you start to get a cascading effect, potentially, of stuff starting to come out of the system. And that then supports your idea that says you now find out all this stuff that the government's been doing and they haven't been telling you about. And that the remote viewers say, and they've looked into this business toward the end of 2027. They say the whole kind of global civil war thing hinges on betrayal. They say that there's this common broad-based perspective that says, you've screwed us. We gave you our money, we gave you our trust and everything else, and you've betrayed us. And that, how does that happen? because the secrets start coming out, and you start seeing what they've really been doing.
Yeah, I just looked up just now to see what, and definitely 2021 was a huge drop. I mean, $700 billion. Americans failed to pay 700 billion in taxes in their 21 return, so that would be the 22 tax year. Um, that's really interesting. I mean, and the percentage of U.S. household that paid no federal income tax in 2021 is 57%. It's a huge number.
It's the tea leaves. Read the
And
tea
how do
leaves.
you maintain democracy when that happens? Because
Yeah, well, you don't.
that's such a massive. Yeah, you can't.
No, no,
So
that's why you
basically, it's
get.
already unraveling.
Yeah, so that's why you get a new world, and you get a new country, you get a new thing. I mean, I'm interested in a new country. Why don't we start a new country that's built around a whole new set of principles and ideas? And I mean, who? When else do you get a chance to do that?
So that's all that has to happen if everyone just stopped paying taxes.
Well, well,
It's like a defund the government campaign.
well, it's easier than that. There's a science that comes out of Harvard University, and by a guy that I knew of, and who and a couple of his acolytes, disciples, came down to Washington and started a think tank, and they were friends of mine. And what they found out was, and discovered, is that if the populace decided on any given day that they were going to stop doing everything for 3 days, all it took was 3 days, the whole government would fail. That is to say, nobody goes to work, nobody does anything, and the government inevitably falls. And so I could see a bumper sticker that says "Just stop" or something like that with a date underneath it, and then everything changes in a hurry.
This is fascinating stuff. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time. I think it definitely leaves a lot of food for thought for us to come back to and continue to talk about this dialogue, because I really believe that we're going to see a massive shift in all the areas where there are self-appointed arbiters of truth.
Yeah,
And I think that's what's also shifting, is that the American people, and not only the American people, but citizens of the world, are starting to realize that what they thought were facts are merely facets
yeah,
of a larger truth.
yeah.
And that the realization that what we thought was an objective truth was really just the thing that benefited us the most. And now we're starting to realize as well that in order to understand more of what the truth is, we have to be willing to see and perceive other alternative viewpoints and perspectives.
Absolutely. You got to get outside the narrative.
And that's right. Get outside the narrative, and particularly our own narratives.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a massive thing, and that's going to be very difficult for the institutions that claim what is lawful and what's unlawful, what is
Right.
correct and what is misinformation, and what is, so you can think about that as university systems. I think religious organizations are also going to come under a lot of fire.
Absolutely.
And then the inherent hypocrisy that's fundamental to all of these institutions that claim white hat status, but are equally black hat status. And I think that's the betrayal that people are likely to feel.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Well, thank you so much, John. What a pleasure to spend this time with you.
Yeah.
Fascinating discussion. How can people learn more about your work, and where they can find more about you?
Well, come the Arlington Institute, arlingtoninstitute.org. And we've got a variety of things, a speaker series and a newsletter and other kinds of things. As a matter of fact, someday you ought to come and be part of our speaker series. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
That'd be great. And I'm looking forward to being with
Yep,
you in Egypt, by the way. That should be fun.
Yeah. I think you're gonna definitely have a great time, and it's gonna be a mind-blowing experience. And I think, it's gonna be epic. I'm super excited for that trip.
Yeah.
I'm going to Peru next week as well, and I'm really excited about that one. I've been really thinking about it a lot, and I think there's going to be some major shifts that are coming. Every time we go on trips, I just had a call with one of my good friends who came to Egypt with me last year, and she's a pretty well-known DJ by the name of DJ Anna. And she went to Egypt with us for the first time, and it has totally changed her life. Like, she went back and spent probably another month and a half in Egypt in total this past year since she came with us last December. And she was just thanking me like how it's changed her life so much and how nothing is the same in her life now, which is fascinating. And I was like, is that a good thing? But she was like, yeah,
Oh, that's good.
it's a good thing.
Oh, we'll have a good.
So I was glad to hear that. But
We'll have a-
what a pleasure to spend time with you. And I'll look
Yes,
forward to
sir.
seeing you very soon.
Thank you very much.
All right. Until next week on Think Tank.
All right.
Have a good one, guys.
Take care.